Hello, everybody. Welcome to All Villa, No Filler. Please remember to like and subscribe. Subscribe if you love the mighty Villa. Now, Àlex Moreno, that handsome young Spanish man who plays for the mighty Villa. Well, he doesn't play for the mighty Villa anymore or won't do in the very near future. As Fabrizio Romano, that transfer guru, has tweeted out in an exclusive that Nottingham Forest, Robin Hood's own team, the Sheriff of Nottingham's favourite team, has agreed a deal to sign Àlex Moreno from Aston Villa with the medical booked for Wednesday morning. Here we go. Initial loan with buy option to go. So, Àlex Moreno. Now, the reason I thought I'd just record this is because I think it's worth noting that Àlex Moreno was a massively transformative signing for Aston Villa in our first season Unai Emery's first season. If you think about it, um, he came in January, £14 million from Real Betis, a little bit older, about 29 years of age, I think it was at the time. He came in, and when Unai had come into Villa, he had a left back in Luca Dean who was a little bit more of a solid, what I would call a solid conservative fullback. Somebody who you can probably rely on to just be kind of defensive, quite stout, quite safe pair of hands in the Premier League. Somebody who can do a solid job against a Jarrod Bowen, for instance, as he did this weekend against West Ham. But he's not somebody who you think of as being quite dynamic going forward. That's not what he is. Àlex Moreno, when he came into Villa, the transformation on that left-hand side was immediate. And you have to remember, he got signed by Villa in that January transfer window. I think it was sort of midway through. Within a couple of days, I'm assuming Unai Emery would have wanted to sort of slowly ease him in, give him a few training sessions, and then maybe start him somewhere, with a little bit more, little lower pressure, if that's possible in the Premier League. It kind of isn't really. But Luca Dean got injured against Leeds United in a game Villa won 2-1. And I remember Àlex Moreno got thrown on in that immediately. And, Àlex Moreno coming into a whole new league against a team that plays quite high high intensity, high press, a Bielsa Leeds United team. And I think that Moreno, from what I recall from that game, did a fantastic job. He wasn't on for very long during the game, I think maybe just 10, 15 minutes. But to come into that environment and stand up in the way he did and put himself about for somebody who's quite physically slight, as I say, in a whole new league, a new culture, he did a brilliant job. And from there, it was kind of strength to strength to strength. And Aston Villa's left-hand side, I remember it describing it at the time. It was like Professor Unai was a horticulturalist, right? He laid the seeds on the left-hand side of the Villa Park pitch. He laid the seeds. And throughout the rest of that season, he filled his water bucket and he'd go along and he'd water up and he'd water it and water it. And eventually it bloomed. And Aston Villa, from January through to, I think it was May, the run we went on fired us up from Steven Gerrard's, just need a little bit more relegation contenders to making Europe. We went on a fantastic run, barely lost a game, won loads of games, led to players like Ollie Watkins scoring 8 goals in 10 games. And so much of it came down that left-hand side. And I remember I went to Crystal Palace, Aston Villa, in about March of that year, and Villa won 1-0. And that was roughly a month and a half into Àlex Moreno's time at Villa. And the dynamism of him, his ability to link up with Douglas Luiz, who was sort of on the left-hand side of that midfield, Tyrone Mings on the left as the left centre back, Jacob Ramsey in particular, but then for Moreno to get to the byline, be able to pull it back and create opportunities in that way, cause havoc for the Palace defence, and to bring, he could bring Ollie Watkins into the game in that Ollie Watkins could run in front of his defenders for a goal. You could have the guy at the back, Leon Bailey, say on the right midfield, coming at the back post for a Moreno cross, or you could have Jacob Ramsey coming in, darting in from deep for a Moreno pullback. All of these things brought out the best in Tyrone Mings. I think Tyrone Mings improved massively with Moreno there. I think Douglas Luiz found another outlet to play with there. Jacob Ramsey, I think, went up levels playing with Moreno. And I think it helped Ollie Watkins. And I just feel it's worth noting that Àlex Moreno was an absolutely transformational signing for Aston Villa in that half season that got us up to Europe. And he was a big, big part in how Villa ended up getting into Europe that season. It made us a more dynamic team and it turned Aston Villa's left-hand side into a lethal, potent force. And it's such a shame that that partnership we saw between Moreno and Jacob Ramsey, literally at the end of that season, Àlex Moreno got a terrible, what turned out to be a terrible hamstring injury, going for a diving header against Liverpool away in a brilliant defensive performance from Villa. Again, we drew 1-1 from a late equaliser by Liverpool. Moreno got that injury, and we didn't really see him again, did we, until last season, roughly about November, December, was it? Um, and uh, you know, he kind of found it difficult to work his way back to form last season, right? So he wasn't quite the same, and I think that not having Jacob Ramsey there didn't help him because Ramsey himself got injured, and it's such a shame he couldn't see a continuation of that partnership last season. Of course, we had a great season still, but it's a shame we still didn't have that option. If you look at Luca Dean, as I say, he's a much more stout. He's a much more kind of Mr. Dependable. He's a solid Premier League defender. That's what he is. And I think now that we've signed Ian Maatsen is essentially, what is he, 8 years younger than Àlex Moreno? And if you saw in that brief cameo against West Ham, he did the Moreno role. He was solid defensively, but he was dynamic going forward. He picked up a perfect position for Pau Torres to hit the ball into, lays it forward with a perfect touch. And who's there? Jacob Ramsey to put that ball into the centre, and John Duran scores. That kind of link-up play was what we saw from Mings, Moreno, and Jacob Ramsey during that half season where Villa fired up into the Conference League. And, you have to look at it in his last season. Played 21 games in the Premier League, got 2 goals, a crucial one against Brentford, I remember. Conference League, 5 games, 1 goal. He got no assists last season, which was slightly different to the season before, where he actually got 3 assists for Aston Villa in 19 games. And I think that's kind of where you can see the comparison, is that, okay, got a couple of goals last season, but it was just how lethal he was with his assists and the pass before the pass that leads to an assist as well. And for Nottingham Forest fans who might be watching, you're getting you're getting a dynamic fullback. He's a bit older. He is coming back from an injury. He didn't quite reach the level that he was at, compared to the season before. But it was very difficult for him to come back into a team that basically was playing really well, and with Luca Dean being a very solid fullback. And if you look at his FBref stats, going forward, his progressive carries are, very, very good, high level, much better than most fullbacks. Successful take-ons, his touches and progressive passes are recorded, very, very good. Clearances are very good as well. Aerials, one not so great. Interceptions good as well. So he's an attacking fullback, is the way you put it. And I think Nottingham Forest are getting a player who knows, if he can play regularly, might just add a bit of dynamism down Nottingham Forest left-hand side, linking up with a player like maybe a Hudson-Odoi. I mean, look, I don't know a great deal about Forest, I've got to say, but if he can form a partnership down that left-hand side with Forest, if Nuno Espirito Santo allows him to be a progressive player down the left-hand side rather than somebody who has to be a bit more defensive, then I think Forest are going to acquire a very, very useful player. He might go quite a long way to creating chances that ultimately keep Nottingham Forest in the Premier League this season, or who knows, maybe even dreaming a bit higher than that and pushing up into mid-table and daring to dream of higher than that. Who knows? Who knows? But look, with Ian Maatsen coming into Aston Villa, you have to say it makes total sense for Àlex Moreno to go out on loan now, and a buy deal in there as well makes total sense. He needs minutes. He's not going to get them at Villa this season with Ian Maatsen there. And look, Luca Dean's on big wages. It's very difficult to shift him. And that being said, I think Luca Dean, regardless of whatever the finances are of it, I don't think it was a great financial deal done by Christian Purslow. I've talked ad nauseum about that. I think there were a lot of deals done during that Purslow Gerrard year that were awful, and we're still paying a price for it. But I think Luca Dean clearly loves playing for Aston Villa. You got to give him that credit. He's really involved. The another one stuff. There's lots of players who don't do that. He does it. And and despite the fact that he was linked away so much at the start of last season, despite the fact, Villa signed Alex, Unai Emery brought in Àlex Moreno, Luca Dean never stopped trying. He never sat there and said, I'm just going to take the cash and that's it. He's always worked so hard. He's been a great professional for Aston Villa. He was really good for us last season, very solid. And I think that having that sort of contrast between Luca Dean and Ian Maatsen works a little bit better than the contrast between Ian Maatsen and Àlex Moreno. They're just a little bit more similar. And I think that when Villa want to be a bit more attacking, Ian Maatsen offers that, as we saw against West Ham in that final 15 minutes. But in the first half of that game, Unai Emery went a little bit more conservative, which was understandable. Kept that solid professional who understands that, Aston Villa a bit more than Maatsen does at the moment. In Luca Dean, and Luca Dean kept a fantastic player in Jarrod Bowen very, very quiet all game. And believe me, Jarrod Bowen isn't the only superb attacking player that Luca Dean will be able to keep quiet this season. And there may be games this season where, like I say, Unai Emery wants something a little bit different. Ian Maatsen, I think, is going to be the starting fullback for most of the season. But there will be games this season where he goes, do you know what? I want Luca Dean in there just because he offers a little bit more defensive solidity. Won't go forward so much. I don't need that in this particular game, even though Ian Maatsen is a very solid defender, as well as a better progressive defensive player than Luca Dean. And also, can we just mention, big shout out to Oliver George Watkins. The man's just been voted into PFA Player of the Season. His fellow professionals have voted him into Team of the Season. So the front three: Erling Haaland, Phil Foden, and Ollie Watkins. I kind of feel a little bit emotional about it in a weird way because Watkins, we've seen his growth from a player who came up from the Championship, signed by Dean Smith, Sir Dean to you and me. Coming to Villa and in his first season looked really, really good, like a player who needed that first season to then jump on and progress and become a great player. Had a lot of raw ingredients that at times you could see he was raw in that first season. There'd be occasions when Jack Grealish would set him up for chances and Watkins would maybe rush his chance. He'd miss the chance. He'd hit the bar all the time. His touch would be a bit clunky, but he still scored a whole bunch of goals. But you felt from that season, it was like, he's going to build on this and get more and more goals. That isn't actually what happened in his next season because Aston Villa, in the Purslow era, signed Danny Ings. I've just said it before. I think there were a lot of signings in that Purslow year that led up to his departure that I think didn't make any sense and financially made no sense. And I think Danny Ings probably fits into that. I think Ings coming in, the question I think a lot of us had at the time was, well, what does that mean for Ollie Watkins? Are Aston Villa going to change their shape from the 4-3-3 we were playing? Will Watkins become the left side of a front three? Will we go to a 3-5-2 and it's Watkins and Ings playing together? It was a conundrum that Ollie Sardine himself couldn't work out. It's something that Steven Gerrard couldn't work out. And then it was something that Unai Emery came in and said, this simply doesn't work. Let's sell Danny Ings, and I'm going to make Ollie Watkins the main striker. And Watkins, who'd had quite an iffy year and a bit for Villa after a strong, solid start in his first season, when he was finally made the main man, when he didn't have that question mark of, is Danny Ings going to start over me? He became the player I think a lot of us knew he eventually could be, and reached levels that a lot of us maybe thought he couldn't. Went and scored 8 in 10 in Unai Emery's first half season. But then, last season, 19 goals in the Premier League in 37 games, 13 assists. I mean, extraordinary. 5 goals in 10 Conference League games, 53 games last season, 27 goals, 13 assists. The numbers he was racking up last season were world class. There's not a team in Europe that wouldn't take him. Not a team in Europe that wouldn't take him. Wouldn't. Um, and he's made himself a Villa legend. And then obviously it all culminated with that incredible last minute winner against the Netherlands for England. He got the recognition on a international, global level that I think his talent deserves. Brilliant. What a player. And I'm delighted to see him recognised alongside such fantastic players as Phil Foden and Erling Haaland. Delighted to see him recognised as the player he is, and what an amazing servant has been for Aston Villa to get the PFA Player of the Season. It shows where Villa have got to, and he won't be the last Villa player to be included in awards like that. This is the start of the Unai Emery journey. There's a long way to go yet, and there's plenty more awards to come for a lot of our players, and there's plenty of trophies to come as well. I'm sure of it.